up and running?
Yes.
All right. Blimey, what day is it today? Thursday.
Thursday.
It's Thursday at 1 o'clock. It must be Quarantini time. Except it isn't, because I'm drinking a cup of tea, because 1 o'clock's...
Quarantini.
Yeah, it's much too early for Quarantinis. I usually don't start drinking them till about 1:30.
Whoops.
Oh, Trish is smashing up the studio. I might have an early quarantine today, though, because after this I'm going up to the Maple Leaf to play with the Absolute Monster Gentlemen, with my band, the Absolute Monster Gentlemen. No audience, I'm afraid. That's not allowed yet in Louisiana. Can you believe it? But we'll be being filmed for something that'll be broadcast later in the year, I believe.
I think maybe in August.
August or September, something like that. So that's going to be fun. We've got Nigel Hall, A.J. Hall, the Hall brothers, and Cornell Williams. Cornell Continental Williams, excuse me. So welcome to this thing we've been doing every week since lockdown, which is a bit of New Orleans piano. I'm here to answer any questions you might have about the music. And I also want to say thank you very much to all the people that have signed up for the new Patreon site and joined us on this exciting new project. Very excited to see the great response. We've got over 100 people already. And so I'm going to give a shout out, but if I gave a shout out to everybody, it would take more than an hour.
Yeah, so we're gonna
So we're gonna break it into little bits. So I want to say special thanks. I don't know if any of you all are watching, but to Joe O'Callaghan. I better put my glasses on for this because I'm seeing double here.
I did put it in like a 22-point font.
Art Butler, thank you. David Kessner, Tyler Cobbett, Pat Haskell. And Pat actually very kindly sent me a wonderful Miguelito Valdez box set of old 45s, playing some of my favorite Ernesto Lecuona tunes. And one of my dad's old favourite tunes, The Breeze and I, which I think he used to dig by Gina Lollobrigida. Did she actually record it? I'm not sure. Anyway, I know he digs that one.
Such a good
In
name.
Spanish, La Brise y Yo.
Gina Lollobrigida.
Yeah. Thank you, Pat, for those lovely records. Diane Hurrigan, John Guthrie, Susie Robbins, Laura Whitby, Wendy Constantine, Felix Elliott Greenberg II, Kate Welch, Zach Lisk, Sebastian Gertzen, Dan Lackman, Leo Joseph, Rafael Dos Santos, who I think is in Argentina, is that right? Somewhere. A long way away. Thank you, Raphael. Bruce Lefebvre, Richard Fannon, Ron Phillips, John Simpson, David Sidwell. I'm going to have to take a break. There's so many names. Pamela Tibbetts, Robert Phillips, Marie Manel Bell. That's a good name. Eric Tomsky, Laureen Kelson, Roger Leventhal, Steve Simon. Thank you, Steve. Steve Simon from the St. Croix Blues Festival.
St. John.
St. John, forgive me. James Saylor, with a silent P, I'm presuming. Sally Shaw, Brian Hargreaves, Ira Platt, Carrie Hughes, Rex Leatherberry. Rex, also that was a great name, Rex. Alan Bradbury, Michael Bursky, Penny Pennington Miles, Paul Klein, Welton Barker, Marjorie McIver, and Casey Lipscomb. Blimey,
Wow,
I got through all of them.
That's everybody?
Well, that's not everybody. That's a small fraction,
Yeah,
but that's
today's-
as much as we can get through today. Otherwise, we won't have any time for any music. But thank you all very much for joining Patreon. For those people who are watching who don't know what Patreon is, go online and check it out. Patreon. And over the next week or so, we're going to be making a new Absolute Monster Gentleman record. We're getting started on one at least. And so some of the Patreon people will be getting little updates and studio clips and teaser tastes of some of the songs as they develop. So that's going to be exciting. And anyway.
So you want to say you're taking a week off?
Oh, that's the thing I was supposed to say. So because we're recording next week, I'm going to take a break from the Quarantini hours, Tuesday and Thursday.
Maybe, what about the piano?
And the piano lesson on Saturday, we'll do the piano
Probably do the
lesson,
piano,
yeah. The one-finger piano
There's
lesson on
just too
Saturday.
many things to move around, and once they get on a roll recording,
Yeah, we've got to set up drum mics and we've got to use all this, move the piano and do all
Can't
that
be
sort of
having
stuff.
Groovis interrupt us.
No,
Or
no,
making
indeed.
a recordist.
No, indeed. So if you tune in on Tuesday, looking for Quarantininess, I'm sorry, but you'll be disappointed. You'll have to wait for another week. Or you can go to the, alternatively, you can go and look at the back catalogue of One Finger at a Time piano lessons and Quarantini hours, which have been organised now and archived on the Patreon site for easy access. Cool. Any
Want a
questions?
question?
Yeah.
Yep. All right, let's see if I can read this with the mic where my computer is without writing it. Brian Hargreaves says, John, what is the history of the New Orleans rhythmic wiggle, not straight, not swung feel? And how have you learned, developed that in your playing?
The rhythmic wiggle.
Rhythmic wiggle.
Do you mean me personally or the actual what I'm playing on the piano?
Don't do that. I'm the only go-go dancer in this family.
Read the question out again because I want to make sure if I understand because I'm
All
not
right.
quite sure
What
what
is
this
the
means.
history of the New Orleans rhythmic wiggle? And then in parentheses, he has straight / not swung feel. And how have you learned, developed that in your playing?
Well, I'm not entirely sure what's meant by the rhythmic wiggle, but New Orleans has an interesting way of swinging grooves, and there is an important thing in all aspects of music where if you're swinging, for example, you're going to want to make something swing, then in order for it to be perceived to be swinging, it has to be swinging in contrast to something else that's happening. So if you, we have to deal with this in the Monster Gents playing funk. You know, funk is where you play a lot of accents. And if all you do is play accents, then they cease to be as effective because they're not being contrasted against something which isn't accented. And a good example of that, basically, in New Orleans music is the Big Four. We talked about this a couple of times with AJ when he was here with Hurl and Riley on a previous Quarantini hour. This idea of, you know, that's got more impact because it's been preceded by this. And rhythmic wiggles. I'm not sure if that's what's meant by a wiggle. It's very hard with music because the whole point of music, not the point of music, one of the most beautiful and enchanting aspects of musical sound when it's generated by an efficient musical sound generator, like a talented musician, is that it can move you, and it moves part of your brain and part of your whole general makeup, which is not accessible.
He says not straight or swung, but right in the middle.
I see. All right, cool. All right. Well, what I was about to say there was, you know, it's very hard to find right adjectives when you're talking about music, because what makes music so profound is that it exists in an area beyond language. And so any adjectives we use fall far short, but we have to use them, obviously, when we try to describe something we've heard. But going in between swung and straight is something you develop, really. And I think one good way of developing it is marching in a second line parade and drinking too many beers on a hot, sunny afternoon in New Orleans.
And eating a pork chop sandwich.
And trying to eat a pork chop sandwich smoke a cigarette and hold a beer at the same time and dance down the street.
And find your people.
Because you will find that you kind of wiggle and wobble between the straight beats and the funky accents that make you groove. And that's how it kind of gets in you. And also living in New Orleans for nearly half a century and drinking the Mississippi water in your tea is a good way. I think it's a feel thing, and it's very intangible. So... It's interesting. That's a really good question, and it's interesting because everybody feels it differently, and drummers especially. Some drummers play in front of the beat, some drummers play behind the beat, and these were things that musicians talked about and felt, but it was never really illustrated as clearly as it has been in recent years with the development of new computer technology that's in use to record music, because now with Pro Tools and Logic and these other Cubase and these other programs, when somebody plays drums, especially if you play drums to a click, you can actually look on the screen and you can see physically that someone is playing before the beat or behind the beat. And that's where someone stamps their personality on what they do. And why a different drummer, you can have 5 different drummers, and they'll each playing the same songs, and they'll each bring a different energy. Some drummers will play behind, and it gives you that great sloppy thing, but then it makes you have to adjust. I personally like drummers that play in front, because then that way I can play behind, because I like to do all that sloppy, sort of drunk New Orleans playing. Style is drunk, not the piano player, I hasten to add.
Right.
So that's, it's very hard. I don't know. The answer to the question is not, I think you just have to
live here for 40 years.
Well, that's why I moved here. I never was going to get it if I stayed in England, I didn't think, really, because it's just a different culture. So I came here and lived a life, really, and that kind of gets in you. You hope, if you're working at it.
Simon Hardcastle says, can you break down the chords to bring him back the home?
Sure. B flat.
You move your mic back a little for this one.
Okay. Bringing back the home of the greatest gift America gave the world. Jazz, funk, rhythm and blues and soul. But it bold and blow your home, 'cause it's time to call your children home. Cold wind blowing through, oh, cold wind blowing through, oh, new wind blowing through a song. Well, when you really start looking at chords, you could spend great deal of time on really getting to the minutiae of the chords. But when you have chords in a song, you can play the most basic shape. And I'm trying to answer this question in a way that will be understood by musicians, but also non-musicians, people who don't play, for whom this is all kind of a bit of an arcane mystery. So if I give you an example of the basic chords, the chord in its primary unadorned form, and you will hear that that's the chords, but there's something missing. So I'll give you an example. So, bringing back the home of the greatest gift America gave the world. Jazz, funk, rhythm and blues and soul. Cold wind blowing, bad wind blowing, but a new wind blowing through our song. Okay, so you can hear it's a bit ugly and plain, really, I would say, unadorned. So the first thing you can do with a chord, both basic shape, is revoice the chord. Still 3 notes, but you just put this bottom note on, add it, move it to the top, so it's in the top position. And now, bring it back, and then now you can, in your left hand, you play the bass and you move around the chords. So you lead the ear so that it knows to anticipate what chord is coming up, and then when it hears the chord, the listener gets a sort of sense of reward. But here, for example, the first chord changes. Bringing back the home of the greatest gift. So that's an interesting chord. And it's actually a mixture of a few chords. You can mix chords up. Imagine if you were cooking a curry and you prepared some curry powder and some coriander and cumin and mixed them all up, and that was going to be, and then you could do another bowl with some, what else do you use? Some pepper and some salt and some garlic. Turmeric. And you could either use that bowl in it would taste great, or you could use that bowl in it would taste great. But what if you mixed them both up and threw them in? That would be interesting. And that's kind of what's going on with this chord. Going from B flat to D 7th. There, its basic form. But I'm also adding this note, which is interesting, because now it means that within this chord you have 2 elements that generally would be incompatible, which are these 2. You play them by themselves, they sound very out of tune. But listen to them now in the context of this chord. So it's a D chord with a 7th and a raised 9. So bringing back the home of the greatest gift. E flat, America rule the world. E diminished is a gospel chord. This one here is a B flat. There's the chord, but now we're playing it in this, what's called an inversion. We're just inverting the sequence of the notes in the chord. And instead of playing the root note on the bass, which is this, we're playing this note on the bass. And this, listen to what it does. It gives the chord an altogether slightly more important field, because it induces a sense of motion, because you know it can't stay there. This is not the bass note that you'd end a song on or end a phrase on. It contains a message that is going somewhere. So it's like you're about to get a kick in the arse, because it's going to go, whoa, and there's your reward. So this chord is a G with a raised 5 and a 7. And a raised 5, and is this one. And the next chord, it drops down 1 step to here. But the 7 in this chord drops down in the next chord to here. And, sorry, that was what was that? Yeah. And the 3rd in the next chord drops down a half step. So you get 3 things going on which sound pleasing to the ear. Beg your... That's what's going on. 3 notes that are all just dropping a half step. And then the next chord is F, and now we're introducing a 7th and a 6. And then you can do a passing tone. Back to B flat, to B flat 7th, E flat, E diminished. More about that chord in a second, and then B flat with a 5 in the bass, to the 6, C9, F6, and then a 4-chord E flat with a B flat on the bass, the tonic on the bass. Any one of those changes I could talk at length about, but we'd be here all day.
Let me ask you just this. He didn't ask this, but me personally, as someone who could barely play anything, can you go like bringing back the G to the E and just kind of do it just one through kind of in a quick way?
Bringing back the B flat to the D7th, the E flat major 7th, E diminished, B flat with the 5 on the bass, G with a raised 5, and C9, F7th. But it B flat, blow your horn, B flat 7th. It's time to call E flat, your children home. Ooh. C, B flat with a 5 on the bass. Cold wind blowing through. I saw B flat, E flat with a 5 on the bass.
Yeah, great.
That's the short answer.
Yep. Okay. Here's a question. He sort of asked it twice and then he expounded upon it. So I'll read the second one. So Jeff Casson says, is proficiency in traditional jazz piano a prerequisite for playing New Orleans style piano? Looking to learn the latter, but my teacher is drilling the traditional jazz and jazz improv as a first step. I just can't get into traditional jazz, so I'm in a bit of a bind.
Well, short answer is no, I would say. If you like New Orleans rhythm and blues, you can start heading straight towards that goalpost. But you will find on the way that if you want to play it properly, then there is some knowledge, some background knowledge that you'll have to develop on the way. And that's kind of the way I learnt, really, because I started out as a guitar player and I liked the blues when I was a kid. So 12-bar blues, 3 chords. And then, you start to develop a greater understanding of the chords that exist outside of that simple realm and then how they can be used. And if you're playing New Orleans rhythm and blues, then you'll find that there are some fairly sophisticated chord changes, Well, now she's gone. You feel so bad, 'cause she's the best girl that you ever had. Oh yeah, Tainted the Truth. So there's, Tainted the Truth, Ernie Cado, and that's got what they call 1625 or ice cream changes, which we talked about in the last One Finger at a Time piano lesson. And the same chords. Let me do it in B flat. Well, now she's gone, you feel so bad. Same first chords as Bringing Back the Home we just played. Bringing back the home of the greatest gift. So there's a limited number of chords and there's a limited number of chord progressions that sound good. I mean, there's an infinite number of mathematical possibilities, but there's not that many of them that sound good. There's a chord progression for you.
Sounds like me.
And, it doesn't sound very nice, though. So you learn, if you're going to learn New Orleans art, rhythm and blues, you can learn, start off with Smiley Lewis or Huey Piano Smith, because you're rarely going to get more than 3 chords in any of those songs. So you don't have to have all the theory. And I think, quite honestly, you develop the theory and learn it as you go, if you're prepared to stick with it and take a long time.
Shout out to Bakita. Hola, Bakita.
Hola, Bakita. ¿Qué tal, mi amor? Mi familia cubana en Havana. Is Bakita watching?
Yeah,
wow, that's great.
Yeah.
Oh,
she says, gracias por esa labor tan linda. Besos desde Cuba. Te queremos.
Wonderful. How lovely.
Okay. Here's Tim John says, hey, John, do you have a teacher or have you learned by ear and by yourself? What would you say to someone who's glued to sheet music?
I would say get the glue remover, get the solvent out immediately and get unglued. I taught myself to play piano. I was lucky I had my dad and 3 uncles showed me stuff on the guitar. But I taught myself to play the piano by just playing guitar chords and finding out where the notes were. And I do feel that there's nothing wrong with learning music in an academic context. But if you're starting out, if you're a young person starting out with this, or even an older person starting out with this, it tends to organize your brain in certain ways that really, to play New Orleans music properly, you conceivably would end up having to unlearn. And I've had situations where people come to me wanting lessons in how to play New Orleans stuff, and sometimes they're really great players, jazz players or classical players, and I show them a lick and they go, I can't. They try and play it. It sounds all wrong because they've got certain fingering habits and certain ways of thinking, skills they developed, which are counter to those that you need for kind of sloppy New Orleans playing. At least the way I play pretty sloppy. So personally, I think for the kind of music I like, I would recommend, if you've got a talented person that wants to learn that doesn't play, I would teach them to give them enough information that they can then go and learn stuff by themselves and figure out and play the way they like, because that way you develop your style and taste. But I certainly would say at this point in my life, I wish I'd had access to some good, really good music teachers who could have understood where I was going and given me the academic stuff that would have been very helpful to me.
Well, but somebody who would have understand where you were going probably wouldn't be spending their time as a music teacher.
Probably, yeah.
They would have been on the stage.
Yeah.
Here's a comment from earlier. Kenneth or Seneth Carlson, I would like to hear a nice and beautiful blues, please. Listening from Sweden.
All right. I've got a blues that's nice and beautiful. I'm going to make one up for you. There you go. That one's called Kenneth's Blues or Kenneth's Blues. Just your choice.
It was wiggling. The overhead piano was wiggling because the mic stand was against the piano. It's still doing some weird focusing.
The New Orleans wiggle. There it comes again.
Yeah, so somebody asked if they could meet me, and apparently I just made a cameo. So there you go, Deborah.
Hey.
That's probably all you're going to get. David Sidwell, he made 2 comments. I'll read both of them. One of them is just a really nice comment. He says, John, music says things that can't be said in any other way.
Yes.
And then he said, do you like listening to Art Tatum?
I love listening to Art Tatum. It's very humbling. It's very humbling to see what some people have been able to... The distances some people have been able to go with this, and it's always good to listen to piano players much better than you are, because it's inspiring, and it can be a little bit intimidating, but no, it's always fascinating because you get to get a glimpse inside the workings of somebody else's mind. Yeah, I was watching a piano player yesterday. Blew my mind.
Bill Evans.
Bill Evans.
Yeah, we had a Bill Evans fest.
Yeah.
Richard Friedman says, as a student of New Orleans piano, rhythm, and blues, I would like to know which recordings most influenced your style.
Well, Professor Longhair, old records. I like his old records better than the later records. Alan Toussaint, Booker, James Booker. Although I didn't have any records of his growing up. First time I heard Booker was when I was standing about 3 feet away from him at the bar in New Orleans, where I'm going to be in about 2 hours. And Mac Rebennack, great piano player. There's all of their stuff. Fats Domino.
Are there any particular songs, records, and stuff that really kind of got you going?
Well, Brickyard Blues was an early one for me. As a kid in England, I grew up a long way from New Orleans. So Brickyard Blues by Frankie Miller, I didn't know it had a New Orleans association. I just loved it. And I knew about Frankie Miller because Steve Simpson, my uncle or second cousin or whatever, it was in his band. And so I knew about Frankie Miller, great R&B singer from Scotland. Sounded a bit like Otis Redding, great voice. And this record came on. It was a small hit in England, but it was produced in New Orleans, and had that, play something sweet, play something mellow, play something I can sink my teeth in like Jello, play something I can understand. Now, play me some Brickyard Blues. I love that. Heavy boom, chicka boom, chicka. That funk, what I was talking about earlier on, straight beats, setting up an accent that suddenly has 10 times the value because it's being heard against something straight. That's funk, New Orleans funk, and then there were, well, Blue Monday, how I hate Blue Monday. Gotta wake like a slave all day. Come on Tuesday, dreadful Tuesday. I'm so tired, I ain't got no time to play. Come on Wednesday, I'm beat to my socks. My baby called, had to tell her that I'm out. Yeah, Thursdays, that's a hard working day. Yeah, on Friday I get my pay. Saturday morning, all my tiredness has gone away. I got my money, and I'm out on the town Fats Domino stuff, those triplets. And then Boogie Woogie whenever rare events when you actually heard some on English television.
Ooh.
It's a very creaky microphone stand. Yeah, not a great deal of access to this stuff. I was lucky because everybody in my family were music lovers, and they all had great record collections. So when I would go and visit my grandma or my uncle or my aunt, I'd make a dive straight for the record player in the record section, be pulling them all out. What's this? And they go, oh, check that one out. That's a good one. And so I got to hear a lot of this stuff. But yeah, various things. I mean, it's just so much music from New Orleans. And now you can just find it all on YouTube. It's amazing. I had to come halfway around the world and go to Jim Russell's record shop to get Don't You Just Know It by Huey Smith and the Clowns on the Ace label.
And you walked uphill to school both ways in the snow without any shoes.
Back when I was a wee nipper, you didn't get Huey Piano Smith on YouTube.
You and me, you bastard.
Watch it, you.
Tom Kilrain wants to know if you're pals, he says, with Bill Payne.
Yes. Not that I get to see him very regularly. Our paths cross every once in a while, but yeah, I've met Bill several times, and there were a couple of occasions when Bill couldn't do a Little Feat gig where I happened to be in California at the time, and I went and did the gig, which was kind of intimidating, but great to be a piano player in Little Feat. That was kind of fun. But he's one of my idol piano players. Him, Chuck Leavell, Mac Rebennack, and all the people I just mentioned. But Billy Payne, yeah, really great.
Very early on in our relationship, I was with you backstage somewhere, and I was just chatting with him about what restaurants to go to in New Orleans, and I was completely starstruck and totally trying to keep my cool.
That's kind of how I am, around all these people, because they were my idols on record, just names on the backs of records, and then you get to meet them and become friends with them, and got the numbers in the phone book and bring them up and say hello. Yeah, it's lovely. He's a great guy, great piano player.
Here's a question from YouTube from Sir Hendrix. How do you decide what left-hand accompanying style to use when playing something lively in the direction of boogie?
Well, I don't really think in terms of left hand and right hand, really. It's just 8 fingers and 2 thumbs painting a picture. So quite often if the left hand gets busy, then you need to clear some space up in the dusty end so that you can hear it, and vice versa. If you're playing busy with the right hand, then you lay out and make some space there. But when you play for a long, long time, you develop some facility to do different things with each hand on the keys, and you learn lots and lots of bass lines and bass parts, and it's almost as though you, well, in my case anyway, I trust a certain part of my brain to get on with the job in the left hand, and I don't really think about it. I probably am considering what's going on here with the right hand, because you're in a key area of the keyboard where you're playing solo lines and you're playing them within the context of a chord progression. So there's a lot of stuff going on. And just over the years from doing this every day for nearly half a century, it's got to the point where the left hand just kind of... And the piano is a percussion instrument and playing New Orleans. You're doing a very important gig, or if you start thinking too much, you can really mess up. So it's best not to think about it at all. Think about what you're going to have for dinner tomorrow. What are we having for dinner tomorrow, by the way?
Probably stir fry.
Ooh, See, I'm going to think about stir fry on this maple leaf gig this afternoon. I'll play perfectly.
Salmon stir fry. Somebody earlier wanted to hear "Take My Love."
Okay. This is a tune by Little Willie John. I don't know if he wrote it. It might have been written by his brother, actually. Take my love, I want to give it all to you. You can take my lips, let it all will do. Well, now your love is my love, baby. Nothing else in the world really love you. I believe that you love me too. Oh, darling, trust in me, 'cause I know my love will do. Oh, baby, take my heart. There's no control. Yeah, you know nothing really matters, baby, if I can't have you. Trust in me, yeah, you know my love will do. Oh, take my heart, take my very soul, and you can take my lips, over which I'm no control. Yeah, you know nothing really matters, oh baby, if I can't have you. Yeah, nothing really matters, oh baby, if I can't have you. Nothing really matters, well now nothing really matters. Well, nothing really matters. Wow, I'd forgotten all about that tune.
Nice
That's a
one,
great
yeah.
tune, yeah. Yeah, by Little Willie John. There's two versions. If you look for that song, Take My Love or Take My Heart, I can never remember the correct title. But there's the one they cut, and there's another version where they overdubbed some really bad kind of Hollywood background vocals. Don't listen to that one, but that's the one that's most common. Try and find, there's one that was on the King label. They put out a limited edition. That was the first Little Willie John record I had, but it's Little Willie John's greatest hits on King vinyl, and that had the unadorned version without the stupid background vocals. Raw, good.
John Fleming said, "Did you ever play at the Dewdrop Inn?"
Yes, I did.
Yep.
Played at the Dewdrop Inn 3 times, but not in its heyday, because it actually closed around the time I was born, in the early 60s. Early 60s, mid-60s. But the building is still there. Dewdrop Inn, for people who don't know about the Dewdrop Inn, that was the main uptown music venue for black people here in New Orleans in the days of segregation, in the glory years of New Orleans rhythm and blues. And it was a high-class joint, but it wasn't that big. And it stood empty for years, and it's owned by the current owner, I think, is the grandson of Frank Panier, who was the guy that owned it originally started in the 40s. Anyway, Dewdrop Inn, legendary joint uptown. The building got seriously damaged in Katrina, not by the hurricane, not by the floods, but by the helicopters that hovered above it at one point, and the updraft from the rotors pulled the roof off. And then in the 10 years subsequent, water got in, and it's badly damaged. But yeah, I played there with Walter Wolfman Washington once, many years ago. And then more recently, Mr. Panier opened it up for me, and we moved. It's a ruin, you know. You can see the sky through the cracks in the ceiling, but it's the old original building. And I called Irma Thomas and James Rivers, and they came in and we filmed a little interview. And we brought a piano in, sat it in the middle of the ruins of the place, and I got to hear stories from Irma and James.
That was great.
And T. Eva too, sadly no longer with us. And they told me all kind of stories and pointed out where the bar. I mean, various stages he moved, shuffled stuff around, but there was the restaurant. A couple of old barber chairs are still sitting in there, probably still there now. I think Earl King was a barber at one point. He used to do hair cutting.
Was it Eva that said that she used to work there and she went into labor, like in the bathroom or something?
Yeah. Well, she didn't work there. I think Irma might have worked there.
Irma was a waitress there. Before she was a professional singer. And then Tommy Ridgely was playing, and she got up and sang with him.
Yeah, so I have played at the Dewdrop Inn. Very proud to say I played at the Dewdrop Inn.
I think, I wonder if it's still for sale. Somebody should buy it and restore it.
Yeah, I think it's actually got a for sale sign on it now.
I wish we could.
Yeah, on LaSalle Street, uptown New Orleans.
Linda Wright says, you have to contend with various IT issues on these sessions, but what are the worst things you have to overcome on live performances?
Probably the menacing glare from She Who Must Be Obeyed at All Times when I'm talking too much. Because there's always a threat of physical violence. She has a full cup of tea.
Live, remember those?
Oh, I thought we went to doing the Quarantini.
No.
Oh.
No.
What is that? Say the question again.
Yes. I know that you just want to make funny little things about me, but this isn't about me. It's about you. What are the worst things you have to overcome on live performances?
Well, usually sound issues. A bit boring answer to a question because it's not like rabid dogs or escapees from lunatic asylums trying to wrestle the mic from you. Nothing like that generally.
Bad sound engineers and crap equipment.
Yeah. I think the worst thing happens is sometimes when you turn up in an unfamiliar town, somewhere you haven't played before, and no one knows who you are, and you set up and you're playing to an empty room. That's pretty potentially disheartening. But the thing is, when you've got a good band like I have, and then we all play for each other's pleasure. And some of those gigs end up being the best gigs musically, funnily enough. But I've been doing it for a long time, and I've had funny things happen to me. I remember playing for I got hired somehow to play for the English Communist Party's annual bash, and with my uncle's band. And halfway through the set, someone from the board of directors came up and said, whispered to me, he said, "You might as well stop playing now because we're not paying you anyway."
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Why, 'cause
the whole
they're
gig
communists?
dissolved. Well, I think, no, he was disgruntled because we were getting paid for the gig where we should have been, I don't know why, who knows?
Because it was a communist
Who
thing?
knows?
And
I've
everybody
got
should
no
share
idea.
evenly?
It was all a bit daft, really.
Wow.
That was kind of funny. I played a gig in Cuba where we got raided by the secret police at Maxime's, my first trip there. Oh God, I've probably had all sorts of funny things happen to me.
There was a gig not too long ago. We were in where was that? We were at the beautiful place. It was like Oregon. It was last summer, and there was that really bad lightning storm, and we had to shut down. Do you remember that?
Big, dramatic light.
Yeah,
we were rocking too.
Yep.
And someone said, there's a storm on the way, and the weather was gorgeous.
Earlier.
I couldn't believe it. When we were playing, it was gorgeous, and so we got to clear the stage, and within seconds there was
it was major.
100-mile-an-hour winds and bolts of lightning.
I was watching it on my weather app.
Yeah. If I put my mind to it, I could probably think of some funny things that happen. Generally speaking, it all goes pretty well, really. Any more questions?
I got nothing.
You got nothing? Wow.
I think I got all of them.
Well, we've got 5 minutes left.
I think I got most of them.
5 minutes, and I'm going to pack up and rush up to the Maple Leaf for a half-hour sound check before we start getting down and playing some New Orleans funk with the Absolute Monster Gentlemen. And sadly, it's not open to the public. If thousands of New Orleanians are rushing out the door, jumping in the car, hoping to come down and catch the band,
Nope.
you might have to stand outside and watch through the window because it's against the law. For the time being, at least, anyway. But I'm really looking forward to actually being on the stage again with the band and doing a proper gig. Although it isn't going to be a proper gig without an audience.
I'll be there. I'll clap.
Well, there will be an audience.
An audience
An audience.
of one.
You and Harry.
Yeah, if Harry comes.
There will be an audience sometime down the line when it's broadcast, and I'm getting quite used to this strange concept of being in here with She Who Must Be Obeyed at All Times, imagining people out there in the big wide world, all 5 of them, tuning in and enjoying the music. So as the little hand slowly ticks around and we get closer to the end of the hour and the show draws to a close, I shall bid you all good night in Europe and good afternoon in New Orleans and good morning in Kuala Lumpur or
Morning.
wherever else.
Probably the middle of the night in Kuala Lumpur.
Probably. Thanks once again to all the people who've joined us on Patreon, and it's going to be a great way of once we are still kind of getting underway. I'm still getting the hang of it, trying to figure out how to navigate around the pages and get a hold of stuff. But people are joining, and it's wonderful. If you're interested, if you're listening to this and you don't know what Patreon is, go online and you can find out very easily. But it's going to be a great way over the next few months to deliver music to the music lovers.
There's just a few questions here for the Maple Leaf. We're pre-recording it, and then they're gonna have like a Maple Leaf festival sometime, maybe in August, I think. So if you just probably check the Maple Leafs page, they'll say at some point when they're going to broadcast.
We'll keep you
this.
posted.
Yeah,
on
they're recording a few other bands. I think.
Yeah.
I wonder if they'll do it for Midsummer Mardi Gras. That'd be a good time.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Don't know though.
So they're going to next no Quarantinis next week because we're going to be here in the studio set up to record, and Patreon people, I'll be sending you little videos from the studio and little tastes of some of the things we're doing. Thank you, everybody, once again, and see you next week. And I'll leave you with a little boogie woogie. We've got a minute to go. All right. Good night or good afternoon.
Or good morning.
Or good morning. Thank you. See you in a week's time. Or more than a week, actually. A little bit more than a week. All right. I'm hooked up. I've got to get unhooked. Get off to my gig at the Maple Leaf.